Hi there, welcome to this video about how to structure your production music tracks, and it's a bit of a deep dive into that, and I'm using a very old track of mine just to sort of demonstrate this. Now, first thing then, so let's start right at the very beginning. Most production music tracks are going to be certainly a minute and a half long, between a minute and a half and 2.5 minutes long. I tend to aim and shoot for about 2 minutes, and you can see I've put a marker in here. This is what, 2 minutes and something, 2 minutes and, oh, I've got the timer on this for some reason. Let's change that to time, and then we can see. This is 2 minutes and 18 seconds, in fact, probably a little bit more, 2 minutes 20. So 2 minutes 30 is fine, up to 3 minutes maybe, it's a push. But you don't really need to be doing any more than 2.5 minutes, generally speaking. The other important thing I think to realise is that it's very, very unlikely that your track is going to be played all the way through. So in terms of structure and in terms of length, you have to sort of think of it in terms of a piece that's not going to be listened to in the way that a traditional piece of music would be. And I think if you come from a performing background, that's quite difficult, because you sort of try to write music as a performance, and it's not actually. This track isn't intended to be listened from beginning to end. So how the sections sort of hang together isn't of prime importance. It needs to sort of work and have a flow to it, but it's highly unlikely you're going to get a 2 minute, 2.5 minute airing on a TV show. You're more likely to be getting 30 odd second snippets, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, little bits of it looped. So we need to be thinking in terms of how an editor might use your track. And how it might be cut to picture. And I think it's really important whenever you're writing production music to actually be thinking about, well, what sort of thing might be going on the screen, what sort of event might be happening, what might this be underscoring. And imagining you're in the head of an editor, and an editor will want to chop and loop and change what you've written. And an editor will be looking at the waveform, which is why I've got that on here. The waveform is vitally, vitally important, and it gives you all sorts of information. So as you can see, what should generally happen is that we start off small, and we have a sort of section of statement of the melody, and we can see it's getting gradually bigger as we go along, and then there's a definite ending. Now, there's several really important things in there. The first thing is that if I was an editor looking at this, well, I know I could chop it here. I could cut it really quite easily at that point there. I could also find an edit point, I think, there. There's an edit point probably to start there. There's one there. Maybe not so much here for the coda, but certainly I can edit maybe there, there, and there, and there. So this has maybe got 2 or 3 different edit points in it. So different parts where the music could start. So actually, if you listen to what those sound like, it would give you a sort of basic version of the tune. Editing at this point. There's an octave change. It's a little bit more developed. Once we get up to here, where this final edit point is, though, you know, you've got the same music, but it's almost like 3 different versions. And actually, trailer music comes in a very similar sort of structure. This almost looks like a trailer structure, in that you've got an introduction here. You've got like an act 1, which is quite quiet, an act 2, which is a bit bigger, and an act 3, which is the big sort of climax. And production music should work the same. You don't have to have 3 acts, but you should certainly have quieter versions, and then finally a sort of bigger version of your theme or your tune towards the end. Most importantly, you find in most production music tracks that you have this thing in the middle here, which is called a breakdown, which is where we get like a tiny little, like a sort of stop down to just the very basic elements before coming back in. It often can build up. And you can see that's actually leading up towards this final statement here. It's possibly not the best example of a breakdown. Other breakdowns will just like sort of cut down just to the drums and things like that on their own, or just like a little bit of percussion going on or something, and then we'll stop completely and then come in loud with the big tune at the end again. But breakdowns are really, really important. So you've got this rise and fall, you've got loud versions, you've got soft versions that could possibly play while there's a big view on the screen, a version that can be played really quietly in the background while there's some talking going on, but still links the things together. It just gives an editor really, really good options. So you're starting small and you're building, and the way to do this is essentially by gradually layering. If we go through, you can hear what's happening here. There's very few repeats that are the same. Which is again really important, because you don't need long sections the same, because a lot of you will find a lot of editors will loop things. So for example, you could pick this first 4 bars or so, 8 bars here, just up to there. Let's see if I can just loop that. You don't need to write out 8 or 16 bars of that. An editor will be quite capable of chopping that and looping it and making it into a bed underneath. The other places, so loopable sections like that are vitally important. Look, there's another loop coming up here, but it's slightly bigger, it's slightly different. Whoops. It's slightly different in that I've added the bass guitar. So for the next little section here, I'm not going to repeat again, but you can see, look, I've added a spiccato string part here. Up, 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 up. Again, it's loopable on its own. You know, it's not rocket science. It's a little thing that you could imagine just accompanying all sorts of things on TV. And then we've got another version here, a further 4 bars on, where I've added something in the lower strings here just to add a bit of variety as well. Okay. So you can hear even within that, there's 4 or 5 different loopable sections, each that's different and building on each other. We've got an end of a paragraph here and a breakdown, an end of a paragraph and an edit point rather. So a really good point where the music may come out and some dialogue may happen. Listen to that guitar note. Guitar note's a bit of an issue there because it's going over the bar line, and you wouldn't be able to, as an editor, actually make a clean edit there. However, my dog just arrived. However, if you're creating stems of this, the guitar would be on a separate stem, and you'd be able to actually get rid of the guitar at that point and do that. Let's go on. So see visually how every 4 bars look. This is basically like we've got here, but then I've added shakers here. It's building here as well. There's a bottom bit gone in here, and then there's these long strings come in to the breakdown here. So because every 4 bars something is changing. It's constantly in flux. Okay, let's go on to this last section, which is obviously going to be the biggest section. Again, within that big section, every 8 bars or so, you can see it building. We start off here, adding shakers here. We add this little bit at the bottom here. Here we add the long strings, and then we get a sort of outro here. Etc. So we've got the tune in octaves at that point. And then it can end in a number of different ways. Whatever you do, though, you must have what's called a button ending or a sting ending or a finishing ending. Production music tracks do not just fade out. They have to have an absolute definite ending. In honesty, not the greatest ending from a production music point of view. It could, okay, it sort of works maybe for the mood of the track, but sort of a da, but would have been better at the end a bit sooner with that last pizzicato. But the point is that the end has got to have a definite ending and no fade out. That's really, really important. So to recap then, you're looking at about anywhere between 1.5 to 2.5 minutes long. 2 minutes, I think, seems to work really, really well. Bear in mind that it's unlikely to be played from beginning to end, and it will be chopped up and segmented. Therefore, every 4 bars or so, you need to be introducing something new, layering stuff up, the overall structure being one that builds from small to big in the end. Edit points, vitally, vitally, vitally important. Somewhere where the editor can see clearly in the waveform that he or she could chop this and divide it up. Loopable sections, like I showed at the beginning here, absolutely vital for editors to create beds and loops and things underneath dialogue. Introductions. This hasn't got a particularly strong introduction, I don't think. I would probably try to get something a little bit more ear-catching in the first 4 bars or so, but there does need to be a very short and very catchy and arresting introduction. And the outro in a production music track has to have a proper stopped ending and no fade out. Hope that was really helpful. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.